Hey now, we are getting over, and I am the Silver King, Adam Silverstein, here to lead you through these hard times. Dada, with episode 683 of your favorite professional wrestling podcast. That's right, Getting Over is back once again, and it is indeed a new year, 2025, which means we are here to break down everything that happened across NXT and AEW over the last week. We, of course, did not have an edition of AEW Collision due to World's End happening. We also had the final episode of AEW Rampage and the first episode of AEW Dynamite being streamed with a simulcast on Max. NXT did not have a special show, but it did air on New Year's Eve and previewed New Year's Evil, which of course is coming up next week. So we have an absolute ton to discuss on today's show. But before we even get into that, I want to make sure everyone is aware this is our third episode of the week, fourth, if you count AEW World's End Instant Analysis. But on Tuesday, we had your WWE episode, an absolutely loaded show. Early Thursday morning, we published the 2024 year in review a day later than we expected, but we got it for you first thing in the morning. Make sure you listen to that if you have not already. As soon as this show ends, go ahead, pull that show up. Obviously, we have your NXT and AEW show right now. And then Friday night, I want to make sure all of you remember this. Friday night, we're going to have a rare instant reaction to the first 3-hour SmackDown. So a bonus WWE edition on Friday. And that is because Monday night, immediately after the debut of Raw on Netflix, we're going to have another instant reaction show for you. So no Tuesday WWE show. We're doing it on Monday, and we're giving you a bonus episode on Friday night. That is how we do it for you right here on the Getting Over Wrestling podcast. The 2024 Getting Over Awards, aka the Meaties, those are coming next week as well, currently scheduled to air on Wednesday. The ballot for the Meaties will be shared on social media at Getting Overcast on Twitter, at Getting Over on Blue Sky, Friday, January 3rd, around noon. You will only be able to vote for the 2024 Getting Over Awards, aka the Meaties, through the end of the day, Monday. So basically 4 days. Ballots will be open. Make sure you're following us on social media, or at the very minimum, make sure you visit our social media accounts. Click on the ballot, vote for your favorites across the entire year. It has been a long, involved process. Putting together the Meaties themselves is always a treat for your boy, the Silver King, and I hope all of you get to celebrate with us next week. With all of that out of the way, allow me to get into some reminders. First, that the Getting Over Wrestling podcast
is all about the five.
You know the drill. Head over to Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Leave a 5-star rating on Apple. Take a little extra time. Leave a 5-star written review. If you do, we'll read it live right here on the show. Don't forget,
I happen to love the number 5.
I hope you do as well. $5 a month, $50 for the entire year. You can become an official Getting Overhead. Visit buymeacoffee.com/gettingover. Sign up. You'll get bonus audio, instant reaction to every major show, and exclusive news analysis posts every week. Again, that is buymeacoffee.com/gettingover. We would greatly appreciate your financial support for the continuation of Getting Over into 2025. Don't forget to subscribe to us on YouTube at Getting Overcast. As mentioned, follow us on social media at Getting Overcast on Twitter, at Getting Over on Blue Sky for both. You'll get episode drops, news analysis highlights, all that good stuff. The ballot for the Meaties will be there for you to vote in, and pinned to the top of both profiles, we have a ballot for the Sports Podcast Awards, on which Getting Over is nominated for Best Wrestling Podcast. We won the award last year. We want to go back to back. If you have not voted, please do so. If you have already voted, please do so again. We badly want to go back to back. We need your support in order to make that happen. We will be kicking off with NXT this week. We will then move into a brief ratings conversation about last week's numbers, Then, of course, we will hit AEW as part of these breakdowns. We will give you a brief preview for NXT New Year's Evil and a brief second look at AEW World's End. So plenty to get to on this show. There are timestamps in the episode description if you wish to hop around. As always, I hope you're listening to the entire program. So starting with NXT, which again aired on New Year's Eve, Giulia cut a translated taped promo saying New Year's Evil will be her chance to live up to the hype and expectations that WWE fans have for her. She said she wants to be in the conversation with the likes of Charlotte Flair, Rhea Ripley, Asuka, and Shayna Baszler. Interesting, she did not put Io Sky on that list. Giulia also spoke about her 7 years in Japan and how there's nothing Roxanne Perez can do to stop her. This was honestly the promo I've been waiting for NXT to give us from Giulia since she debuted. It was one of the longest foreign language promos I can remember WWE presenting, other than Shinsuke Nakamura, but honestly, it may have been longer than many of his as well. And it gave us much greater depth into her character, personality, and her goals in WWE, which is something that's really been missing since she debuted. Kalani Jordan fought Lola Vice. Booker T was straight up hilarious during Lola's entrance here. They surprisingly beat the shit out of each other, with Lani breaking a rear naked choke by standing and falling down. Cora Jade threatened on the apron with a kendo stick, but Jordan countered a grab by Vice, bumped them into each other, and caught her in a rolling bridge cover for the upset win. Cora then started beating the shit out of both women with the kendo stick, only for Stephanie Vaquer to save. But as Lola revved up for a spinning back fist, Cora ducked. She drilled Stephanie with some friendly fire. This was a hell of an opening segment, super hot for a taped show. Cora looked amazing. She moved around better than she has since she returned.
I was up all night.
And the way this transpired created an interesting non-title storyline for a stacked division entering the new year. It does seem like 2 steps down for Vaquer simply because she's been featured in the main event scene for so long, but there was bound to be a logjam with all 3 of the big free agents debuting simultaneously, so it makes sense to have them do different stuff. Vice and Vaquer later argued in Spanish backstage, only for Jordan to come in and drive the wedge further, saying they were just last week telling her to calm down. Lani said they deserved it, only to get shoved, with all 3 of them screaming at one another as Cora watched and laughed. Ava then walked over to Cora to inform her she's going to be involved in a number 1 contenders match for Fallon Henley's title next week with those other women. So it all kind of tied together at the end. You wondered why they were building this story between 4 women who seemingly didn't necessarily have that much to do with one another, and this was the purpose. Not just doing a number 1 contendership for no reason, but actually building a storyline to it. A lot of brands, and I don't just mean AEW, a lot of brands can learn from that. Cedric Alexander fought Ethan Page. Cedric cut a promo backstage putting over the devastation of Ethan's attack, saying Javon Evans' jaw is wired shut, and now he can only eat through a straw. He said Evans texted something about New Year's Evil, only for Page to come in and talk shit, leading to Alexander attacking him and the brawl starting all the way to the ring. That led to the immediate beginning of the scheduled match. Ced hit a tope suicida with Ethan countering his step through DDT with a single leg codebreaker. Alexander came back with a Michinoku driver, but Page booted his head off, basically hit a twist of fate, and got the win. Ced sold this by spitting out his mouth guard and grabbing his jaw as like a parallel to Javon. Page continued attacking ringside, ultimately slamming a toolbox lid into Alexander's hand, which he sold exceptionally well. Ironic that this all happened on NXT because I was just wondering to myself earlier in the day where Cedric went. I kind of hate that his only use right now is as the unk for Evans. Like, he should be a wrestler with his own goals, wants, and needs and initiatives, but that's the role he's currently playing right now. I felt like this match could have been set for New Year's Evil with more build as opposed to just doing it on this show somewhat unannounced. It was a great back and forth between them. Cedric remains massively underutilized. He proves every single time out why that is the case. I thought it was odd to go with a jaw-based finisher in the match and then have Page attack his hand afterward when he could have taken out Alexander the same way he did Evans. Like, why would you not continue with the jaw and mouth-based offense, right? But it still hit big time. Shotzi and Gigi Dolan, Kaden Carter and Katana Chance, and the Metagirls fought a triple threat tag team match. The Casey's did their thing as usual. Shotzi and Gigi, they had some tag team chemistry for sure. Kaden took Shotzi's head off with a running boot through the bottom rope. Katana caught Lash Legend running at her with a Hurricanrana over the ropes before the Casey's combined for a stereo tope tornillo, actually 2 of them. They hit the keg stand for a broken fall. Jakara Jackson blocked a tandem tilt-a-whirl moonsault with double knees. Shotzi then ate it on a tope suicida, falling well short and landing on her face. Her legs clipped Gigi's thighs. She was holding the ropes for her. Big time yikes. I don't know how many times Shotzi is going to botch a tope suicida before she just stops doing it. Go to the top rope and jump off. Do a cannonball. There's a million different high-risk moves that she can do and avoid this one move that plagues her in every single match that she tries it. Jackson splashed off Legend shoulders outside, only for Dolan to catch her with a too slow crucifix bomb. Fatal Influence distracted and pushed Gigi off the ropes, allowing the Metagirls to hit a pump kick and a wheelbarrow cutter for the win. I love that finisher. The only issue with this match was that only 2 women were legal at once, so not the preferred rules. For the vast majority of the bout, it was better than 90% of main roster women's tag team matches. It did get clunky at the end and fall apart a little bit, but that hardly ruined what was great action up until that point. They got a ton of time to work. All 3 teams had their moments. The Caseys again proved to be the class of the entire division. I understand they cannot match up with Bianca Belair and now Naomi stature-wise, but they really should be heavily involved with these titles, especially once they drop them. Super entertaining, fun, talented. The Caseys have it all. I cannot stress this enough. Unholy Union sarcastically clapped on the Titantron after this match, saying they wanted another women's tag team title match and they were willing to go through the Metagirls again to get it. I guess as former champions, them basically getting a bye to the number 1 contendership match makes some sense. Weird that this is all happening in NXT, yet the titles are on the main roster and haven't been down there in months. Hopefully this means 2025, we will see a lot of moving back and forth, given how many great teams are in NXT compared to barely any existing on the main roster. Ava held court with Lexis King, William Regal, and Charlie Dempsey in her office. She said she researched Heritage Cup rules, and they do allow a competitor to win a rounds match via disqualification. However, it's murky whether the cup can change hands in such a scenario. King pointed out that he was declared the winner, so Ava said they'll do a rematch with a sudden death fall, meaning no timing. Regal said he wanted nothing to do with it, and Ava made King hand the cup back to Dempsey. Lexis was upset because he did everything right. He should be upset. I suppose the idea is that King has been acting in good faith this entire time, but it ends up not working out for him, so he goes back to being heel. But this was somewhat nonsensical to me. Doing a sudden death rematch is fine, but giving the cup back to Dempsey as opposed to holding it in abeyance was silly. Plus, taking it away from Lexis when it was said the match can end and the title can change hands that way is convoluted. So I don't totally understand why they're doing it this way. Perhaps that will crystallize next week. Hank and Tank argued with Tyreek Igwe and Tyson DuPont backstage when Shawn Spears entered to wedge drive, trying to recruit the latter team. Wesley stood up to Spears, saying they don't need advice from someone like him. Hank and Tank were floored that they would listen to Wes after everything he's done recently. Interesting that NXT is kind of developing trios. Not sure whether it's short or long term, but you have the Shawn Spears crew, Lee's crew, Hank and Tank were looking for a third on this show. They later approached Andre Chase, who looked disheveled and downtrodden. He was wearing a button-up shirt, trying to convince him to wear their helmet and team with them one time. I just realized I called it a button-up shirt. It is a button-down shirt. I have no idea why I said that. I never call it a button-up shirt, ever. Hank, Tank, and Chase fought Lee, Igwe, and DuPont. Chase was a reluctant participant early, and he got his head super kicked off by West before the bell. The now heels got aggressive, but Chase got into it, hitting a flying senton off the top rope ringside. DuPont did a really nice pop-up World's Strongest Slam. Then the heels did a slingshot double stomp on West. Tank got a great hot tag. Then Chase got the same, only to lose himself when he was ready to call for the Chase U stomps. So he depressingly tagged out. He left ringside as Igwe caught Walker with a stunner off his shoulders for the win. It is crazy how much better all 4 of the neophytes in this match looked, with a couple veterans leading them in Chase and West. This match was way better than anyone could have expected when it started. Tank had his best hot tag and his best overall match since debuting. Igwe and DuPont wrestled better than ever as well. Plus, we got developments in the character arcs of Wes and Chase, despite them being the least important part of this tag team feud. I figured this would be like the most run-of-the-mill part of the show. It actually wound up being one of the most interesting and one of my favorites. Later backstage, Cale Dixon showed up asking Chase when the next semester is starting. Chase reminded that Chase U is dead. Again, technically, the stipulation was that he could not associate with Thea Hale, Ridge Holland, or Riley Osborne, not that Chase U had to go away completely. So we'll see how this transpires. Sol Ruca fought Izzy Dame. Sol and Zarya, again, had a friendly backstage moment about their failed attempt at teaming up. Spears watched from the crow's nest, which I guess led Zarya out to ringside. Dame pulled Zarya in the way as Ruca tried a moonsault outside. That allowed Izzy to I-drive her seated spinebuster for the win. Nice that Izzy has been given something substantial to sink her teeth into. The spot with Zarya outside was a bit strange because Zarya is so powerful that she should not be moved that easily. But Izzy is big enough where I guess the element of surprise kind of factored into that. This was ultimately pretty decent. The women's division is so stacked that you look at this and you get frustrated that Sol and Zarya are not doing anything more important. And then you realize there's no gaps in any other part of the card right now. The main event doesn't need contenders. The mid-card doesn't need contenders. The tag team division, look at all the women we spoke about earlier. So what else are they going to do? The fact that they were able to get a non-title women's storyline like this on the show and have it feel so organic, it really speaks to the quality of booking in NXT. Spears later approached Dame, who again told him to leave her alone. D'Angelo family came through to get her back, which she loved. So Spears twisted the knife on Tony D'Angelo, given the attack by Ridge Holland last week. Nice building block segment. It's kind of funny. The Mafia Don is the staunchest feminist in all of NXT, and not just from this segment. It's been that way for like the last 2 years. Ashanti the Adonis left a voicemail for Carmen Petrovic, calling her the one, saying she always has been the one, and if he can't spend New Year's Eve with her, he's going to spend it alone. The idea was that she's been ghosting him for the last 2 weeks. Nikita Lyons came through, trying to invite him to a hot New Year's Eve party, but he repeated that he'll spend it alone. He was actually surprised at himself that he stood his ground. It was probably the best of these segments in weeks. NXT showed a bunch of WWE ID talent in the crowd for the first time. I realized then that we missed discussing WWE ID on the year in review. Anyway, notable that Kylie Ray was there in the second row standing behind another notable, Zeta Steel. There was also a dude, Cappuccino Jones, who was signed, and I looked him up. This dude totally gets it. He can wrestle. He can cut promos. He's awesome. He also feels like a guy who will eventually get signed by WWE and become like Jackson Java or something like that. We will see if that prediction rings true. Also on this show, they delivered NXT year-end awards, and there was some storyline elements involved with a few of them. Match of the year went to Obafemi, Josh Briggs, and Dijak. Cool that this won, despite Dijak not being with the company anymore. It was the best NXT match of the year, so they got it right. Briggs cut a promo. He even said, "Feast your eyes," as a shout out to Dijak as part of his acceptance, which I thought was pretty cool. Moment of the year, Joe Hendry appearing in NXT. It was a huge moment, but surprising for me that this beat out Trick Williams winning the NXT title or Carmelo Hayes turning on Trick, let alone other major moments like Giulia's debut. Hendry in his acceptance teased that he could appear at any time on any show, and the Raw on Netflix promotional cutaway aired immediately after that. So it looks like we might actually see him on Monday night. That would be immensely strange. He's still under contract to TNA Wrestling through late 2025, and he's also set to appear on the Jericho Cruise in February. It's one thing to use a guy like that on NXT, quite another to put him on your Netflix debut episode, especially when he's cooled down so much from like 4 months ago. Tag team of the year, Fraxium, obviously. They were cutting a good guy promo about finally getting along and being on the same page when Out the Mud aggressively confronted, saying they were coming after them in 2025. Female superstar of the year, Roxanne Perez. Roxy put herself over for dominating the division, attracting top competition from across the globe, and even dropping a pipe bomb on CM Punk. And you know what? Fair enough. Male Wrestler of the Year was the Go Home segment of NXT. Mike Rome was about to announce presumably Trick Williams as the winner when Obafemi entered instead, cutting him off. Femi said awards and fan support are inconsequential. He's the ruler, he steers the ship, and I'm the captain now. He finally dropped that line. Williams obviously answered. Trick put himself and Oba over before calling Femi beatable, saying he lost the North American title. Facts. Then he reminded Oba took weeks off after he lost that title, so he wondered how long he would be out when he beats him to retain the NXT championship. In came Thorpe with a blindside attack, running Femi into Williams and destroying Oba with the NXT award. We technically never learned on the show who actually won Male Wrestler of the Year. It was strong enough as a go-home. It's a TV special, not a PLE. It certainly could have been better. Trick's whole deal for me, it's somewhat losing steam. The promos are rather repetitive. It's mostly the same thing week after week when we see him. He really needs his confidence shaken as a character to give him some edge and depth and create a guy who is more than just a super charismatic babyface. That's pretty much all Trick is right now. He's in a similar zone to Braun Breaker a couple years ago. You'll remember we talked about he needed to turn heel. He had to work a bunch of different styles and a bunch of different types of matches, not be champion for an extended period of time. That's what now needs to happen with Trick. The problem is Breaker, even at that juncture, was a way better wrestler than Williams. So Trick needs to work on his wrestling, and he also needs to work on his character. I know people say, well, charisma can carry you far. It can't carry you all the way to the top. Also, PLE of the Year was awarded. I don't think they did it on TV, but it was Stand and Deliver. Fine, I guess, but Heatwave was robbed. Heatwave was easily the best NXT PLE of 2024. So that takes us out of NXT and into our NXT New Year's Evil preview. Again, we're going to do this rather quick, but it is a straight up PLE card led by 3 women's matches. The first, as scheduled, is Shotzi, Gigi Dolan, and Tatum Paxley against Fatal Influence. Whether this match goes as planned remains to be seen, and it does seem unlikely. Tatum Paxley announced on social media that she caught norovirus and has a ruptured ovarian cyst. That was like 5 days ago as we tape this, so that would be 10 days before the match, plus needing to fly out to Los Angeles. I don't see that happening. So maybe they go 2-on-2. They could also throw a random third into this, like Zarya or Sol Ruka. That could play. But the best bet that I have is Lyra Valkyria, who should be in attendance at Raw the night before in the same city, so she could easily slot into a match here. Anyway, in terms of a prediction, because they're an established trio already, and there might be someone else coming into this match, I have Fatal Influence winning. But I am kind of curious about the Shotzi, Gigi, and Tatum group. They have huge potential together. Heritage Cup, Charlie Dempsey against Lexis King, sudden death. I'm going to have Dempsey win the cup for storyline reasons. They wanted to give King a moment, but not actually give him the cup. Otherwise, why would you take it away from him just to have him win it back? You know, Dempsey's the better wrestler, also in kayfabe. It makes all the sense in the world for Dempsey to, I guess, technically retain the cup in this situation. Women's North American Championship #1 contendership match. Kalani Jordan, Stephanie Vaquer, Lola Vice, and Cora Jade. As much as I would love for Stephanie to win this, it just doesn't seem like she really needs to be competing for a mid-card title. That said, Stephanie and Fallon would be an incredible match at a major show or whatever. I mean, if they did Stephanie and Fallon at NXT Vengeance Day, that would be sick. But it doesn't seem like this #1 contendership is for that, which is 6 weeks away. So I would save that match. You're not going to have Cora win and go heel versus heel. Lonnie just lost the title. You don't want to rematch that. So process of elimination, I have Lola winning the #1 contendership to the Women's North American Championship. The NXT title on the line, Trick Williams, Oba Femi, and Eddie Thorpe in a triple threat match. We've already discussed this a few times on the show. You put Thorpe in the match. That way, neither Trick nor Oba needs to get pinned. What the question's going to be is, do they have Femi win the title here and then have them rematch at Stand and Deliver? Or do they have Trick retain the title here and then have them rematch at Stand and Deliver? What makes the most sense here is for Trick to pin Eddie, retain the title, and then figure out a way for Oba to regain a #1 contendership and get that opportunity WrestleMania weekend in Las Vegas. And lastly, the NXT Women's Championship, Roxanne Perez against Giulia. Now, if this was Giulia's first title opportunity, I would say maybe they have Perez retain it again. At this juncture, given it's her second chance, it just makes all the sense in the world for Giulia to win here, start the new year with a bang, and then possibly have Perez get her rematch at Vengeance Day and then maybe close the book on them. As I keep thinking about like what they're going to do with Roxy, again, it's not that she's too young to get called up to the main roster because we've seen talent up there at young ages. She's not yet ready as a character in a promo. And you do have a concern with calling her up too early. Like, what happens as her career continues going, right? If a 28-year-old gets called up and has a 12-year career, that's them at 40. If a 22-year-old gets called up and has a 12-year career, that brings them to 34. You know, they still have another 6 to 8 years potentially to go. Now, we've seen wrestlers have extremely long careers, and perhaps Perez is one of them or becomes one of them down the line. You can't project out too far. You never know what's going to happen with individuals. But it just feels like she doesn't need to be up there for at least another year, if not maybe even 2. But then you say, well, she's already a long reigning NXT Women's Champion. What the hell else is she going to do in the Performance Center? And that is exactly the issue that WWE is going to be encountering over the next few years. Talents like Roxy, talents like Javon Evans, these super young wrestlers that are so talented and they're so ready to go. I mean, you could put both of them on the main roster tomorrow and they would not be out of place. The question is, can you hold them until they are 100% ready without them getting frustrated and complacent? And that's going to be the question right now with Perez. I'm going to have Giulia win the NXT Women's Championship here. I just think it makes the most sense. There should be a title change on the show. This one would be the one if I had to choose between the women and the men. Now, before we get over to AEW, a quick conversation about ratings. We did not get a chance to discuss them last week because they were delayed with Christmas. And since this week is delayed as well due to New Year's, we might as well go over last week's numbers real quick. NXT did 723,000 viewers and a 0.14 demo on Christmas Eve. That is a straight up ridiculous number. The highest viewership since October 8th, the second week on the CW. It's actually a crazy number. AEW Dynamite did 574,000 viewers and a 0.18 demo on Christmas Day. And they had huge competition with the NFL and NBA airing games. So probably a decent number when you combine the competition and the holiday. But it was the fourth time in the last 5 weeks that they were below 600,000. So it's also now weekly at this point that NXT is getting more viewership than Dynamite, regardless of the circumstances. So that is something to keep an eye on as well. Again, they don't go head to head, but they are comparable when it comes to ratings because they've been so close for so long. Before we get into this week in AEW, I did want to do a brief second look at AEW World's End. I actually don't have that much else to say about the show. I did have a couple final grade updates here. It's not usually the case, but this was easily digestible. It was only 8 matches, so I was able to watch many of them a second time. The 2 notable updates were MJF and Adam Cole. I had it at 3.5 stars B. I watched it again. It really was not a remarkable match. Certainly not to the level of other matches on this card that I gave 3.5 stars to. So I'm actually downgrading it to 3 stars and a B-. It was the worst match of the entire night. And then Kazuchika Okada and Will Ospreay in the finals of the Continental Classic. You'll remember vintage Chris Vanini on the instant analysis thought I might come down from 5 stars to 4.75 and keeping it in A+. I was unsure because I really did love that match. I watched it a second time, compared it in my mind to other 5-star matches from 2024, and he ultimately was right. I did come down a little bit, 4.75 stars for Okada and Ospreay. Still should go and watch it. I mean, it is absolutely fantastic. And I put this on social media, but I want to make sure I say it here on the show as well. If you have not seen the Rev Pro match between Ospreay and Michael Oku from much earlier this year, we tweeted a link to it on both of our social media accounts, at Getting Overcast on Twitter, at Getting Over on Blue Sky. Make sure you watch that before you vote in the 2024 Getting Over Awards, aka the Meaties. I'm not necessarily suggesting off the top that it's match of the year, but we do ranked choice voting, so it very well might be among your top 3. I watched it earlier this year. I kind of forgot about it. I watched it a second time. It is one of the best storytelling matches of the entire year and a fantastic wrestling match as well. So I just wanted to shout that out for everyone. And now that I'm kind of saying it, I do feel like I might have mentioned this on a prior show. Regardless, make sure you go and watch that match. I cannot recommend it enough. When it's something outside of WWE and AEW, I do feel the need to repeat that a couple times. In terms of match relevance for AEW this week, 6 out of 10 were relevant across Rampage, the final episode of Rampage ever, and AEW Dynamite Fight for the Fallen. Of course, this was a go-home week for AEW World's End and a show coming out of a pay-per-view. This is where AEW is really solid with matches booked in such a manner. This week, we have a full week of Dynamite and Collision. No more Continental Classic, so we'll go back to truly judging it starting this week. We're going to take care of Rampage quick, and then we're just going to do Dynamite in its totality. On Rampage, Chris Jericho beat Anthony Bowens in 10 minutes. It was a non-title match. Max Caster interfered with the referee distracted, but it wasn't enough. He and Brian Keith later both interfered, with Caster stealing the ROH title and accidentally hitting Bowens through his momentum. Obviously, this furthers their story, and that did continue on Dynamite. On Rampage, Hook beat Nick Wayne in 13 minutes. This match was run in the same building in a taping after Taz had already returned to TV, with nary a mention of that being a huge part of the storyline. Hook started with a cast on his wrist, but removed it. He ultimately caught Wayne trying a springboard cutter with Red Rum for the win. It really did nothing for either of them. On Rampage, Private Party beat a couple jobbers in 1 minute. Why the champions were on the C show in a non-title match against enhancement talent, I have no idea. There was also an incredibly unrealistic segment of paparazzi following Party into the subway and on the streets of New York. The Top Flight, Action Andretti, Leo Rush shit continued here with a 3-way brawl after the match. The brawl itself was pretty decent, but man, I am out on all of this. So let's get to AEW Dynamite Fight for the Fallen. Now, Dynamite had a new opening. It was I'm So Excited by the Pointer Sisters. And I was simply flabbergasted by this. I'm down with the idea of AEW going with a real song, even though I've been a fan of both Dynamite themes to date. The only good AEW themes, actually. But this did not fit as a theme for a major weekly wrestling show in any conceivable way, especially one that prides itself on being a modern, hip alternative to WWE. I mean, it's worse than when Vince McMahon insisted on using AC/DC's Are You Ready for SmackDown. At least that fit better. I'm not even a fan of Saturday Night's All Right for Fighting being used for Collision, the Elton John song. But at least that fits thematically. This is minor in the grand scheme, but it's another indication that AEW exists like just as much as a personal plaything for Tony Khan as it does an actual business. And none of that is even to mention the people who were in the opening of the show. Shaquille O'Neal, who made one appearance and disappeared out the back of an ambulance like 4 years ago. That went unexplained. He's in the intro. Snoop Dogg, who made one appearance in 2021. And the Costco guys, are they like signed talents now? Why are you throwing random celebrities in the intro to your wrestling show? This got me curious. So I combed the whole video of all the wrestlers. 60% were former WWE talents. Major names like Darby Allin were completely missing. And there was a really old shot of Chris Jericho with the inner circle. Super strange putting all of this together. Also notable about this Dynamite, there was a strange hard cam angle. That was not AEW's fault. Venues have their own restrictions of where cameras can go. The Florida basketball arena, the Stephen C. O'Connell Center, it long had this problem for basketball games. It made watching those brutal. I actually didn't mind the angle for Dynamite, but it was higher and it was notable. So let's go ahead and get to everything that happened on the show. John Moxley led a Death Riders promo that was taped after World's End, giving Marina Shafir credit for taking a bullet on behalf of the entire group. Mox put himself over for carrying AEW through the pandemic, and he threatened to destroy the AEW title before he lets anyone else touch it. He said they are not rebels, but the authority. Rated FTR answered with a live promo saying they were fighting against the Death Riders and for Asheville, North Carolina. Adam Copeland said he's even sicker in the head than Mox is. Now, during the intro of Dynamite, Excalibur referred to the former Edge as the man known as Cope, Adam Copeland. And I just kind of brushed it off. And then, ahead of the main event match, Justin Roberts announced him as the Rated R Superstar, Cope. And I coughed out water from my mouth hearing that shit. Really? Cope?
Are you fucking kidding me?
And then commentary tried to explain it, which was just mind-numbing. Shortening a last name as a nickname is not new. Just look at Mox. But Cope, as a word, literally has another meaning. And it's also not cool. Mox sounds cool. Cope simply sounds stupid. Imagine changing Seth Rollins to Rawl or Roll, because that's what it would spell. This is indeed a Vince McMahon level name change. You might as well have called him Tally C. It's just dumb. There's no other way to put it. There's no reason for us to spend more time on it. It's just dumb. Cope, Nope.
0.0.
The Death Riders fought Rated FTR in the main event. Now, this match was not for the trios titles because Pac was not involved, and also AEW has just forgotten that those straps even exist. Copeland hit Wheeler Yuta with a Liger bomb late, but Mox and Claudio Castagnoli pulled his legs backward to go crotch first into the ring post. Yuta ate a Blade Runner from Jay White with the referee distracted as Copeland countered Mox into a back body drop on the announce table. Then he splashed Mox off the desk through the barricade with FTR hitting Shatter Machine on Yuta before a spear to end it. Who was legal? No idea. Fans popped huge for the babyface win, and there were a lot of nice big-time spots in the finish to keep the energy high. Cameras missed the splash spot, so they actually had to circle back and replay it right before Dynamite went off the air. The best part of this was that some babyfaces actually stood up to the Death Riders and looked strong doing it. The fact that it was a bunch of older ex-WWE dudes is not lost on me, particularly when the overall angle has been about young talent from AEW stepping up. But it was a strong main event, and Copeland looked good and healthy coming back. That was more important than anything else. Big Bill was being interviewed for no reason earlier in the show. He called over Rated FTR, saying everyone in Asheville is proud of them, but they need to be taken down a branch or two. So Copeland challenged them to a trios match in Charlotte. It was a strange setup, but this did make it clear that the goal will be strapping them up with the trios titles to actually do something with them, since they've been completely irrelevant ever since Death Riders won them. MJF, of course, was not there in person, but he cut a promo after World's End saying it's time for retribution, starting with getting the AEW title back from a guy parading around as a king. When he's better than a king, he's a god. It was the best promo MJF has cut maybe in the last year, even if the whole heel versus heel idea doesn't make that much sense. Also, MJF's promo in kayfabe was taped before Mox's on the same night, yet he knew a specific phrase Mox used in his promo. Really strange logic gap that should have been recognized upon taping. We learned Kenny Omega will return next week. Then Kazuchika Okada got a promo package completely in English. He called Will Ospreay little brother and cautioned Omega to stay away before he gets beaten again. I believe Omega has the wins record over Okada, but he's a heel, so I guess it's okay. I was down with this until he dropped bitch at the end for no reason. I really thought he had moved past it. We had Orange Cassidy against Hangman Page. This opened the show. Orange did his pockets thing while Hangman had him by the neck, so he hit 2 tornado DDTs. Then he countered Buckshot Lariat with Beach Break. It was kind of clunky. 3 orange punches followed. But as he celebrated for no reason before trying a 4th, Page was able to recover from 3 orange punches and catch him with Buckshot Lariat for the clean win. Definitely the right result, but undoubtedly a dumbass finish. Hangman attacked after the bell with 2 Deadeyes. Then Christopher Daniels came out, still dressed up. He's an official, but he's no longer an interim EVP, only for CD to get attacked himself. So Cassidy is in a faction, yet none of his half-dozen friends had any desire to help him, and we know a couple of them were backstage. And now with the Daniels attack, you have to assume that match is going to happen. Is that what people are wanting in 2025? Hangman against Christopher Daniels? Rough logic, rough booking here. Jay White backstage was angry at Wheeler Yuta for costing him the AEW title. He promised he would pay for that, and then he talked about earning a title shot at Maximum Carnage. Good promo. Swerve Strickland got a promo later, but didn't say much of anything. Adam Cole later confirmed Kyle O'Reilly was part of Undisputed Kingdom in a Roderick Strong promo segment. So O'Reilly straight up left all the guys that pulled him up from his lowest point in conglomeration to link back with the guys he wanted nothing to do with because Strong got attacked by MJF. Don't forget, he fought Cole. He remained angry at him after that. This is lazy bullshit, and this group is an absolute disaster. So we had White, Swerve, and Strong in a trios match. This was a qualification match for the number 1 spot in the Casino Gauntlet, which was being held next week to determine a number 1 contender for the AEW title at Maximum Carnage. You got that? I actually didn't mind the concept, but why would Strong get this opportunity? Why wouldn't Hangman have been in this match, given White got the chance, and neither of them got pinned by Mox? Late in the match, Ricochet stabbed Swerve in the head with a pair of scissors over the barricade while the referee had his back turned. White then caught Strong with Blade Runner to win. For a match involving these talents, it left a lot to be desired wrestling-wise. Swerve bladed while the match finished, so Ricochet hit him a few times to get blood on his shirt. He then hit Prince Nana with a steel chair, and he was able to do whatever he wanted with Swerve, despite this guy hardly being injured. Ricochet sat Swerve up in a chair and hit Spirit Gun to kind of end it. He didn't do the stupid setup with the hand, and with using the chair, having him elevated, it actually looked okay, though I do hate it. Then Undisputed Kingdom saved for some reason, but just the 3 guys, not the Kingdom themselves. Perhaps there's something to the heels turned faces concept where them making the save makes sense, or maybe they're going to talk about the NXT relationship. That can be used to explain it, but it was unexpected to say the least, having 3 guys save Swerve from Ricochet after Ricochet was already done beating up Swerve. I do enjoy how this latest embarrassment at World's End with the toilet paper led to Ricochet snapping. He was violent and methodical here. I thought it could have been a little bit more aggressive. I hope he's capable of telling the story of his changed character beyond this attack. He's certainly been more interesting making this turn than the rest of his AEW run. I'm just not going to jump in with both feet until I see a lot more from him. Mariah May backstage cut a sarcastic promo saying she believes the women's division is great because she outworked all her peers. She said it's time for the greatest women's division to prove itself to her. They're going to have to work for it. Really good promo by Mariah in a silo, but suggesting AEW has the best women's division is obviously laughable. And if AEW actually wants to sell what she said in her promo, that's going to require a lot more matches and a lot of women getting featured more regularly and consistently. You can't have someone appear on TV once in a month and then become a number 1 contender and tell us you have the greatest women's division. I hope it happens. I'll believe it when I see it. Mercedes Moné got another championship celebration. Perhaps there were audio issues because her theme sounded like shit. She aired a video package that put her over at 15-0 in her debut year. Then she promoted the Wrestle Dynasty match against Mina Shirakawa, the first time any of these matches have actually been pushed on television. And really, to my recollection at least, the only match that was pushed for this show. Total waste of time segment. Acclaimed fought Hurt Syndicate. In a taped confrontation from earlier, Anthony Bowens asked if Max Caster hit him on purpose last week. Caster obviously denied, and he appropriately asked him why it took him so long to even bring it up. One of the most logical story beats from AEW in ages. We talk about this shit all the time. Why don't wrestlers talk about their issues off screen? They don't have each other's phone number. They don't see each other in catering. Why are they waiting until they get in front of a microphone and camera to address their issues? Max said he's so focused he's not even going to rap ahead of the match. Acclaimed botched a spot where Caster was supposed to blind tag and anger Owens, so they had to reset and do it again. That led to Bowens jumping off the apron, watching as Caster ate 4 German suplexes and submitted to the Hurt Lock. Outside of the excruciating botch, this was well done overall. Caster was already on Bowens' last nerve, tagging in blind just seconds after he was in the match for a brief period, and he was also rolling offensively at that juncture. That's unforgivable for a partner. Straight up selfish. We talked about Acclaimed needing a refresh. I'm glad it's finally happening. It was also a nice showcase for the Hurt Syndicate, just flexing and such. By the way, if AEW truly wants to revitalize this tag team division, strap up Bobby Lashley and Shelton Benjamin. It's as easy as that. Jamie Hayter fought Giulia Hart. An arrow got brought into the match as a distraction, so Hart could mist Hayter in the eyes and win. The mist was either colorless or she didn't bite the color capsule. It was the weirdest mist I've ever seen when it comes to a visual medium. I guess that's one way to get out of the match, though. You'll remember how we discussed either of them winning clean would have been problematic. This did not get me interested in the feud continuing, though, even if I was down for it theoretically at the start. AEW made a big deal about a sudden segment, Jeff Jarrett addressing his future. They tried to build some drama by having him bring his boots out to the ring. Jarrett ran down his whole career in the ring. He put over the creation of TNA Wrestling without even saying the promotion's name. He ultimately said he's not retiring yet. Rather, he re-signed with AEW his last professional wrestling contract, with eyes firmly set on the AEW championship. The segment was fine enough. No qualms about Jarrett's promo. And as a wrestler, it should be his goal to win the AEW title. But am I going to be enthused about it? No, at least not now. They got to do better than Mox, Copeland, Christian Cage, MJF, and Jarrett being the top title contenders in 2025. Hook cut a tape promo from a Stoop saying he's not done with Christian and the patriarchy, and he's fighting Cage in 2 weeks. Hook really struggles to speak. He is awful on the mic. Powerhouse Hobbs beat 2 jobbers in a minute. Why? No reason whatsoever. It was a solid episode of Dynamite overall. For it being a big show, the first on Max, it did leave a lot to be desired. Lots of empty segments, a ton of big names not on the show at all. Maybe they're going to go all in for Maximum Carnage in 2 weeks. Perhaps that's going to be the idea. They're going to completely load that show up. But given this was the streaming debut, you would think they'd put their absolute best foot forward, and they definitely did not do that on this episode. So that wraps up our NXT and AEW show. It has already been an incredibly busy week right here on the Getting Over Wrestling podcast. A reminder, shows that have already been completed: your WWE episode, we actually published that Monday night; your 2024 year in review, which came out Thursday morning. Both of those are waiting for your ear holes if you have not heard them yet. On Friday, January 3rd, we'll be back with your SmackDown Instant Analysis. On Monday, January 6th, we will have your Raw on Netflix Instant Analysis. And I should mention that Friday show about SmackDown will also be an ultimate preview for the Raw on Netflix. I did forget to mention that. On Wednesday, January 8th, as it is planned right now, we'll be back with the 2024 Getting Over Awards, aka the Meaties. The ballot will be out by Friday at noon on social media, at Getting Overcast on Twitter, at Getting Over on Blue Sky. Make sure your voice is heard. And then 1 week from now, same bat time, same bat channel, we'll be back with your NXT and AEW show. 8 episodes, 12 days. That's how we do it right here on the Getting Over Wrestling podcast. On the way out, some reminders. First, hit our social media. I already mentioned it. At Getting Overcast on Twitter, at Getting Over on Blue Sky. Vote for us as the 2024 podcast of the year in the Sports Podcast Awards. If you don't have social media, go to sportspodcastgroup.com. Find the ballot for Wrestling Podcast of the Year. We are the first nominee. Getting Over, we won the award in 2023. We want to win it again in 2024. We need your help to accomplish that. Don't forget the Getting Over Wrestling Podcast.
It's all about Defy.
So head over to Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Leave a 5-star rating on Apple. Take a little extra time. Leave a 5-star written review. If you do, we'll read it live right here on the show. And please remember,
I happen to love the number 5.
I sure hope you do as well. $5 a month, $50 for the entire year. You can become an official Getting Over head. Visit buymeacoffee.com/gettingover. Sign up. You will get the fastest 5 minutes in professional wrestling, instant reaction audio to every major show, and exclusive news posts on Fridays. Again, that is buymeacoffee.com/gettingover. All right. The week is almost up. We still have another show for you on Friday. So the Silver King is going to sign off and leave you with just 3 final words. Bye for now.